Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to the Data-Driven Decision-Making presentation. My name is Olga Escamilla, as Beth mentioned, and we'll be covering a lot of information, and I'll tell you a little bit about it in just a moment. I did want to mention that this module for the Instructional Leadership Excellence Academy was developed by Liz Moya, and I am going to be delivering the content. So I just wanted everybody to see me. Hi. And now I'm going to turn off my camera because I live in the middle of nowhere and I want to be okay in terms of bandwidth. So welcome everybody, and we'll get started. So we're going to cover what data-driven decision-making process, or we're going to define that. We're going to identify the characteristics of the data-driven decision-making. And we're going to recognize data criteria available in teams. And we're also going to apply the data-driven decision-making process for improved classroom outcomes. So you might hear me say either data-driven decision-making or DDDM. So I'll be talking about that. I'll be mentioning it in those both ways. So make sure that you have that team's period of participation report that was placed in the community of practice. We also want to encourage you to post your questions throughout the presentation. If you have any questions, I tend to cover the information and continue. So if you do have questions, please post them in the chat and Beth will stop me and we'll address any of those questions that you may have. So I'm going to be covering a lot of information. So we want to be able to acknowledge your questions as they come up. And when you see this icon, please respond to the questions or type your answers in the chat pod. So you'll see this icon come up a couple of times throughout the presentation. So just be sure that we have your response in the chat pod. Then because this is a virtual platform, we can't really see everybody, but we would appreciate that you would respond in the chat so that we could verify your active engagement and participation. All right, so we're going to get our feet wet with a short activity. So on the following slide, you're going to read the paragraph carefully. So I'm just giving you a few instructions in advance. Your job is going to be that of an inspector. So as an inspector, you're looking for the number of defects in your product. So for this exercise, the letter F, uppercase or lowercase, is considered a defect. So therefore, your job is to count all the F's in the paragraph. So there's some constraints. You do work under a time constraint. You'll have 2 minutes to complete your inspection. Also, you're not allowed to alter the product that you're inspecting, so you cannot print or write on the page. Of course, you're going to see it on the screen. So confirm that everyone knows what an F looks like, and I'll respond to any questions. I see one thumbs up. Thank you. So Robin or someone, can y'all do a 2-minute time? And
I can do a 2-minute timer for us.
Okay, great. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go to the next page. Again, you'll be counting all the F's. So after 2 minutes, Beth will announce stop, and one by one, we'll have you report your answers. So are you ready? This is the test text. So begin.
Timer has started. 1 minute remaining. That's our 2 minutes, Olga.
Okay, who knew that 2 minutes could seem like an eternity? So using your reaction or in the chat, you could type the number of Fs that you counted in the 2 minutes. $37, $45, $45, $43, $46, a couple of 46s, $36. All right, is that everyone? Thank you, Christopher, Nuri, Heidi, Adam, Carnice, Sarah, Elizabeth. Did we get everybody? All right, well, some people, let's see, did anybody get between 25 and 30? I think everybody got more than that. We got 37 and Randall got 20. We have a lot of upper 30s, and that's common. Most people report answering in that low to mid 40s. We got some 40s. We got some 46s. All right. Any others? Did everybody put the response in the chat?
Yes,
All
I think
right.
we have everybody's response.
Everybody. All right. Well, the correct answer is 48. 48. So close. Yeah, there was a lot of 46. So what did the 2 minutes have any impact on how on that, how you worked or how you read through the statement? Yes. Did you have too much time, or were you able to read it more than one time and count more than one time? And if you want to unmute, you can unmute and share.
This is Adam. Yeah, I think I read through it really quickly. I read through it 3 times, but if there had been more time, I would have been marking them in some way as going along. But the limited time, I just didn't think to do that, and then I wasn't sure I'd have enough time.
Right, but the restraint was no counting, no marking it, no printing it, and things like that. So just reading it visually, very good. So you did you come up with the same number both times or 3 times?
No, I got more every time I counted.
Okay, very good.
And we do have a couple of comments from Heidi and Nuri in the chat. Heidi said, I was able to count the Fs and then go back and read through it quickly. And Nuri said, I did it quickly, but then tried one more time and I got all confused.
Well, thank you, Adam. Thank you, Heidi and Nuri. So people are looking for that letter F, but rather than looking and scanning with your eyes, you're reading and you're not counting Fs that sound like the letter V, like of. So if you're reading through and you read of, well, that's not an F, that's a V. So the same can be applied when we're looking at data. So we need to define exactly what we're looking for in order to make the right decision. So thank you, everybody. Great participation. I love the feedback. So let's continue. So let's talk about the data-driven decision-making process now. So can I get someone to volunteer to read the definition?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Defined as the process by which educators examine assessment data to identify students' strengths and deficiencies and apply those findings to their practice.
Thank you, Sarah.
Welcome.
So in essence, it's making decisions based on quantitative information or hard data rather than opinions, observations, and gut feelings. So, all right. So using the chat pod, what types of data tools are available to you now? So type in the chat, what types of data tools are available to you now? Teams, says Christopher. Kahoot reports, says Nuri. Surveys, Robin says. Elizabeth says. Burlington English reports for your distance learning, and then Teams. Common Lit, says Randall. Aztec reports, Christopher says Aztec. Beth says Excel. Sarah says Teams, Tops Pro, Aztec, Excel. Cornelius says Remind and Google Classroom. Heidi says Teams, Excel, and My One Flow. Very good. There's quite a few there that are very much related to your program. The TABE report, says Adam. Edmentum. Education Essentials. Okay. So do you have access to additional information but don't know how to use it or what it means? Potentially? So today we're going to learn about some tools that are available to us. So thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, we're going to learn about some various tools that, again, are available to us. All right. So there's 5 steps to the data-driven decision-making process. The first is know your mission. The second is identify sources. The third is organize data. The fourth is analyze that data. And the fifth is draw conclusions. So let's start with number 1, know your mission. So in order to identify or construct your mission, there are some important elements to consider. In terms of WIOA outlines a 4-year strategy that provides a range of employment, education, training, and related services and supports to help all job seekers secure jobs while providing businesses with the skilled workers they need to compete in the global economy. So what is the goal? And I always say our goal is college, career, employment, get a job, keep a job. So TWC strategy, there's 4 parts to this. So it's number 1 is to increase workforce, secondary and post-secondary education and training outcomes. Strategy 2 is to address demand strategy. Number 3 is to increase system coordination and integration strategy. And number 4 is to improve performance excellence. So you also need to be aware of your local program expectations in addition to meeting state and federal guidelines. So what are your program goals? What is your program's mission? So what is your program state? So that's something that we need to be aware of. So what are some of those? What is your program's or what are your program goals? What is your program's mission? Can somebody type that in the chat? Sarah says MSGs. Thank you, Sarah. Participant count. Progress. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and continue. Thank you, Sarah, for that. So let's move on to step number 2, identifying data sources. The second step is identifying those data sources. And you listed some great sources earlier, but what about student attendance reports, the ITEC plan, the assessment score reports? I see Heidi says, to meet enrollment numbers, MSGs make sure that our students enroll in post-secondary and or employment. Very good. Thank you, Heidi, for that. So these are just some other sources that I'm not sure if I saw in terms of maybe HSC or IET credential reports, the formative assessments, and maybe student surveys. Right. So there are 2 types of data, qualitative and quantitative. And we're going to look into each one. So the first type that we're going to discuss is quantitative data. So can I get a volunteer to read this definition of quantitative data?
I'll read it.
Thank you.
Quantitative data are used when someone is trying to quantify a problem or address the what or how many aspects of a programmatic question. Can either be counted or compared on a numeric scale.
Well, thank you. Thank you for reading that. So there's 2 ways that we can analyze this quantitative data that was just mentioned. And one of them is with the statistical package for social sciences. And that's a software package for statistics. So with this software, you can obtain your mean, your median, your mode, your significant correlations in the data, and obtain statistically significant variables for formalized study and much more. And then we have Tableau. Has everyone heard of Tableau? So if you could put a reaction or yes or no in the, yes, we have it. Oh, Deborah, yes. Heidi says no. Sarah says no. Carnice says no. So yes, but I don't know anything about it. So Christopher, I'm going to give you the very basics. And maybe once I do that, then we could get a little bit more information. So Tableau, it's more than an organizational tool. It's user-friendly in that it gives you visual representation of data and breaks your data down to class level. It provides comparative analysis and information as to how you're doing in meeting your targets. Now, I believe that Lori is here, Lori Slayton, and she's our sponsor with TWC. Lori, do our instructional leads have access to Tableau, or is that just for directors?
You know, it goes directly to the directors. They can allocate access if they choose to. But I'll tell you, there's been so many problems getting Tableau online. I don't know how soon it would be that they would be able to get access.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you, Lori. And so just know that that's potentially another tool that can be used to organize the data that comes out of our, is it out of
It's Teams data.
Teams? Out of Teams. I was going to say, but I didn't want to misstep. All right. Thank you, Lori. And thank you, everyone, for your responses. All right. So
Olga,
Bri-
before you move forward, we did have a comment from Sarah on formative assessment.
okay.
And I didn't know if we wanted to address that. She's got formative assessment equals CASAS question mark.
Okay.
A
And
formative assessment could be lots of different things, not just a standardized test, right?
right. I was I was thinking in terms of formative assessment. Okay, she said thank you, but I was thinking that formative assessment was more of yes, assessments that are created to measure whether someone has mastered the content that has been um, taught.
Right. So it could be a teacher created assessment.
Yes, that's what I think of when I think of formative assessment, because the CASAS is more of a standardized assessment that has been proven to be what are the words I'm looking for? Their reliability is
Well, we can't use them unless, not as an MSG, correct?
validity. Thank you, Deborah. Well, that is a question.
Well, a teacher created assessment, no, would not be used to count towards an MSG. It's something that you would use in the classroom to help guide your instruction and to ensure that the students are grasping the concepts that you're teaching.
Okay, I gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. So CASAS is more of a formal assessment. It's not as much as that formative assessment that's created by
So,
an instructor to determine whether content is mastered.
so it's something that's during the year. So it's, okay,
Teacher created and
Right.
generated.
thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Thank you for that. And thank you, Deborah, for the words. So yes, our standardized assessments, which are the TAPE, the best 2.0, best literacy, CASAS, those are more of those standardized tests that have been validated through a rigorous process. Very good. Thank you. So let's continue. Oh, I think I was here. So either raise your hand or provide a reaction in the chat if you've seen this report before. This is a staff development report, and this is an example of a quantitative data. So has anybody seen this report before? No. So this report, it's from Teams, and it does provide information. It provides information about the professional development activities that have been completed by each one of your staff members. Even yourself is probably in this report. And this information is entered into Teams by either your PD coordinator or by your data entry person. And this allows you as an instructional lead, if you have someone print this professional development report, it could provide information to you as to what professional development your instructors have completed throughout the year and in previous years. So this is good information to know in terms of the instructors and what they have completed already in terms of professional development. All right. So how about this one? Here's another one. This is a participant roster with the latest assessment. So how familiar are you with this report? 1 low, 5 you are very familiar with it. Okay, so Sarah says very familiar. Courtney says 5. Elizabeth says 1. Not familiar, no. All right. So again, this is a participant roster with latest assessment, and you can use this report along with the MSG and the POP report to get a full picture of where each participant stands. The MSG report is going to give you the latest assessments because the MSG is updated nightly. So yeah, exactly. So Elizabeth, nothing to be sorry about. This might be one of the reports that you might go back to your QA person or someone that has access to Teams, or maybe even your director or supervisor, and have them. Oh, you have seen it before. Oh, okay. So have them print that report and you can have a conversation about it. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And Heidi says, sorry, yes, I've seen the previous one. It's given to us to let us know how many training hours we have. Not familiar with this one. Oh, okay. Thank you, Heidi. All right. So this one might be something you might ask about, the participant roster with latest assessment. All right. So how familiar are you with the period of participation report? Once again, you can indicate in the chat with a 1 very low or 5, you know it very well. Elizabeth says 5, Sarah says 2, Mary 2, Randall 2, Adam 5. Thank you. Okay, so Carney says, Carney says 5, and then Heidi says, after the POP webinar, very familiar. And Sarah says the webinar helped. Well, great. Great. So the period of participation report, commonly referred to as the POP report, is one of the reports most frequently used. It provides a program side snapshot of current student enrollment. And this report is updated nightly, not nicely, but nightly, based on data that is entered into Teams. So it's important for the data to be entered in a timely manner in order to get the best data on this report. So we'll be focusing on the POP report in a little bit further on in the webinar, on that sample report that was placed in the PD portal. Okay, here's another report, but this one comes from the Division of Operational Insight. It's the NPR summary report, and it's based off of the monthly data validation from every provider. So the NPR provides a standing of how each grantee is doing in each of the performance targets shared by TWC. So this report is provided specifically to AL grantees. So this is going to give your program an idea of where they stand on performance measures. Share a reaction, if you have seen this report. You can either do a reaction or you could do 1 no and 5 yes. And this is, again, it's shared monthly with their director. So we have some 1s, 5. And this kind of tells you your total enrollments by grantee, your IET enrollments, your target, your proposed target, and your enrollment, and then your EL Civics enrollments. Here, your target, your proposed target, and then your enrollment.
We have a question from Sarah that this is not from Teams, right?
Right. This is, again, this comes from the Division of Operational Insight. And Lori says this, yeah, the department, Department of Operational Insight. Thank you. Good question. So Christopher says, I've seen presentations with this information distilled into a spreadsheet. Yes. Very good. All right, so let's talk a little bit about qualitative data. So qualitative data describes qualities or characteristics, or collecting data using questionnaires, interviews, observations. Sometimes we have focus groups, things like that. Frequently appears in narrative form, more of a written out, and it may be difficult to precisely measure or analyze. Not always, but it may be. So one example of qualitative data is a student, this is a student evaluation of class and program. So this is where the students are provided with a survey, and they kind of give information about what class they're in, where's the class located, how long they've been attending class, who their teacher is, or if their teacher's well informed about the subject. So a lot of information that is collected, and this kind of gives us an idea or gives feedback about how the students' impression of different aspects of the program, the class, the instructor, location, things like that. A lot of great information is collected. Now, this can be turned into visual, and we have a sample of that. So the question that we turn into a visual is, my teacher is well informed about the subject taught and many other things in general. And here you have most of the time, all the time, or not much. And here we get a pie graph, and then we get the count and percentage. So we could put it from, we can enter it and get these visuals from that. And we can even get a bar graph of some data. So this is which of the following do you feel you learned something about in class? And we have the different aspects, the how to handle money, US government, history, different categories. And so we could get an idea. And this, based on the class, this is going to give us an idea of what the teacher's teaching and what topic they covered the most. If you see in this class, the highest percentage was US government and history. Okay, so that's, again, just a visual of that student evaluation, and it depends, again, on the question that you ask and responses you're going to get based on those students. All right, another one is this classroom observation, monitoring, and technical assistance record. So this is a evaluation form of instructor evaluation form. So you're going to have a conversation, you're going to, with the instructor, you look at the classroom instruction, the subject being taught, the objectives or lesson. Was it whole class instruction, independent study, small group? So this is where the supervisor or instructional lead goes in and evaluates that instructor. Of course, you have a pre-conversation letting them know that you're going to be there, letting them know what's going to happen, maybe even giving them an opportunity to see what you're going to be looking for. And then talks about the teacher's role. Did the teacher follow the lesson plan? Because we do have to have lesson plans. Was the instructor motivated, animated, interested in the lesson? So a lot of questions about the teacher role. And then the required basic skills in instructional areas. So this is just a sample of an observation or monitoring that a either supervisor or instructional lead can provide for that instructor. Just another example of qualitative data. So let's move on to step 3, organize the data. So we've talked about a lot of different reports, a lot of different data that we could collect. So let's talk about organizing that. So think about all the reports we talked about, whether they were qualitative or quantitative. When we organize the data, we look at all the data as a whole to get a better picture of our program, service, or delivery. So 2 examples could be, you compare your student account of attendance to your team's report or to the sign-in sheets, or maybe how students felt about the performance on the test versus looking at the actual score report. Another example would be, we looked at the professional development report that provided information about the professional development that our instructors have been through or that our staff has been through. You could take that, you could take the student report and gather some information about how the students felt or what the instruction that was most covered or least covered in the session. And you can also take the performance of the student, the assessment data of that student, look at all of it together, look at how the students, maybe how the students are doing or how they've done throughout the year in that class with that instructor, and come up with some different, that's a lot of different data to cover that you can relate to. Oh, okay, well, this instructor is taking a lot of professional development on US government and maybe EL civics, and maybe that's why they're only teaching that subject, or maybe it is just an EL civics class and that's why they are teaching specifically that content. So another example might be with assessment reports based on the best, the TABE, and the CASAS. However, assessment scores are only indicative of a specific skill set. For example, a TABE math score must be further broken down into subsections, and looking at the number of questions, maybe items compared to the number correct. So even the subsections can be narrowed even more. So consider all the other factors that may have been contributed to a student's score, such as the test anxiety, not feeling well, or forgetting their glasses. So then there are academic factors. If a student didn't answer a question correctly, was it due to the processing the information, organization, or understanding the main idea, deduction, maybe cultural bias, the tester's voice, etc. So in other words, a score is only one aspect of the student's profile as a whole. So having this perspective in mind, that's going to allow you to think in broader terms, and it'll allow us to make changes as needed for improved services to our students. All right, so let's move on to step 4, analyzing the data. In step 4, we analyze the data. So some examples of questions you might ask about the data are, and this is talking about that periods of participation report. So if you had that handy, these questions will kind of get you thinking about that. What does the period of participation report say about my students? What does it say about the program? What does it say about instruction, potentially? And what does it say about data entry? And also, what does it say about professional development? You know, we talked about all the data as a whole, and we have all of these reports, all this information that we could get from teams. And somebody had mentioned even the TABE reports that they look at. So all of that combined as a whole, let's look at all of it together. All right. So let's move on to step 5, drawing conclusions. So step 5 is where we draw conclusions based on the analysis and the questions asked in step 4. Is there any inconsistent information that doesn't correlate to the mission? If so, what's the significance of this? And Sarah, you have a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
It might be something that you will go over later. I just had a question, and this might be something that maybe Lori would know, or I was looking at the POP report, and I was wondering, is there any report that will tell us how many hours since their last test? Like, it has total hours, total proxy, total direct, total all that. And I just wondered if, because, I have probably 30 students in 3 different classes, and I just want to make sure that we're getting them tested in time. And right now I have to go, literally into every person's and see how many hours they have. Will this POP report, I looked on here, but I didn't see it.
Lori?
Yeah, there is a way to pull that, and I'm not the person to ask about pulling things out of Teams, I can tell you. But there is a report that will tell you hours since between tests, so you know when to test. That's what you're looking for, correct, Sarah?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it has it in the actual, view, the test view, whenever you're viewing the test, it has it. But I've looked everywhere for reports, just to kind of, so we can get in that MSG, get them tested. And
do you have somebody locally there that's real good with Teams? Or do any of your colleagues pull the reports?
None of them, sadly, no. I mean, I've probably
I
been,
can find out, I can find that out for you and let you know. There is a way to pull that.
Yes. Sarah, if you'll type your specific question in the chat, that'll help us capture that.
okay.
And
Thank
then we can respond to that in the community of practice with
Oh, okay.
information. Will that
Okay.
be okay? Will that be okay?
Yes, perfect. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
And Adam says, I've seen a report like that from one of my coworkers. So yes, I do recall that we would pull a report. Like Lori said, I don't know exactly what it's called.
Thank you.
And it would share information about how many hours the student had.
Thank you,
Find out
guys.
about testing. So thank you for that question, Sarah, and we'll work on getting you an answer. All right, let's continue. So we just covered quite a bit of information. And so how do you remember all these steps? Let's look at a mnemonic device that will help us remember this process. My sister often attracts drama. So for mission, my is for mission, sister, sources, often, organize, attracts, analyze, and drama, draw conclusions. So MSOAD. So now that we've reviewed the data-driven decision-making process, let's look at a few examples and practice what we just learned. You will need your POP report. So if you have that, the sample POP report that was in, so we're going to take a look at that. So we already know we already have our source of information, which is step 2. So what are the major elements that you identify from the POP report? And Robin has just placed that, just in case, in the chat. So what in the chat, if you will, what are the major elements that you can identify from the POP report? Thank you, Lori. And Lori stated that the MSG report shows hours since last exam. Thank you. All right, so Elizabeth says last service date. Christopher says 90 days past last service date. This is the date participant will exit. And then Elizabeth says last contact hour date. And Heidi says if the student is a participant or not. Very good. Maybe number of days before exiting. Participant start date. Total hours earned. Did somebody say total hours earned? I think somebody might have. All right. Participant start date. If received their HSC. If they're in a career pathway, if they're in an IT. Very good. All right. So sometimes a report provides that information we need, but it may not all be user-friendly. So it makes understanding the information rather difficult. So organizing the data, which is step number 3, my sister often, so organizing the data, it helps us focus on the areas you want to better understand. For example, there are 2 ways in which the information presented on this report can be organized. One way is to download it as an Excel spreadsheet and filter the data fields. So if you're technologically challenged, then there's the good old-fashioned way of highlighting specific cells. Of course, this will take some more time, than the first method, but it'll get the job done. So on this report, how is the information organized? Most of the time it's alphabetically by student. So if you look at that sample pop report, it's alphabetically by student. And please know that on the sample pop report, the names have been changed. And so those are just fictitious. So we may want to filter based on the information we're looking for. So for example, on that report, the pop report, if we could filter by the last service date, maybe by the number of days since last service date, or maybe the total basic education hours. So there's different, depending upon what we're looking for, there's different ways that we can filter that data. So using step 4 of the process and the column labeled number of days since last date of service, let's analyze what this information is telling us. So let me go there because I think you all have it. Okay, here is the sample participation report. So what can you determine from what this report is showing? Are there any trends that are developing? So let's look at it for a little bit. I'll give you a moment. And Heidi says the age the student was when it became a participant. That's true. That's a good one. Let's see the age at participation. So this, Heidi, you're talking about this column here. And this one, of course, is been removed, but this normally does have an age at participation. So what can we determine from this report? Are we still seeing the report, everybody?
Yes. So
Okay.
you want us looking at column L? Is that the one you want us looking at right
Well,
now?
just in general, what
Okay.
can you determine from the report? I mean, there's a lot of different aspects that everybody's mentioned. So we could look at the I'm looking for the exit date, the 90-day where let's plan gap. We don't have any planned gaps. Last training hours in class and none. Last training hour date. Total hours. Last direct hour date, maybe. Number of days since last date of service. So we might want to look at the number of days since last date of service. Who do we need to contact because they're going to exit? Exactly. That's a good point. So number of days since last service. So does it look like we have quite a few students that are going to hit the 90 days? We actually have one right here that's already at 90. Then we have one right here that's got more than 90. 105, right? And then we have this one that has 92. So this, right, I think this number of days since last date of service is very important in terms of we don't want our students to have that exit or flag, do we? Yeah, that I think that's why you mentioned what do we need to do before they hit that 90 days? So how do we need to get in touch with the students? So call them. Yeah, contact them somehow, try and get them back. So based on the information on this there's a lot of information that we can draw conclusions about. And like Beth said, what if that student's going to be an Exeter? What would be our next step? Are there preventative measures? Which are the long-term and which are short-term measures? Who in your team would need to communicate your ideas to develop a plan? So Heidi says, if we sort the data by number of days since last service, we have 3, 105, 92, and 90. Yes. You got, yes, correct. So we have 3. So that are already beyond that 90. So what do we need to do? Who do we need to communicate with? So I think that this report is very good in terms of telling it, like, so that we look at that and make sure that we're vigilant about working with our students or determining a plan before they hit that 90 days. So why is the 90 days important? They'll be an Exeter. Right, after 90 days, if the student has not had any type of service, come to class, enrollment into post-secondary, they're no longer a student. And if they come back, then they count as 2 students and they now have to meet 2 measures before the student hits the 90 days. We want to call them back. And if they can't come back, we want to put them on a planned gap. So this is where you develop a plan to assist your students to help meet their needs and the program's needs. You lose them as a participant, but if they come back, and many of our students stop out and then they return, and when they return, then that's 2 MSGs you have to meet. So it's everyone's responsibility to utilize this report to help meet program performance. So we want to be able to put that student on the plan gap before they're exited. And then Beth says we need to get some of these folks in distance education. And yes, Beth, that is a great idea.
Look at all those zeros on those proxy hours.
Let's share that. Did I stop sharing? Let's go back here. Oh, right here.
Yeah,
That kind of, yeah,
that caught my eye.
Yeah. So definitely. And one of the things that what the beauty of, and thank you for mentioning that Beth, the beauty of distance learning is that your students that do participate in distance learning, it is a proven based on the data that has been collected and historically that your students that are attending distance learning progress faster than students who are not consistently participating. So thank you for that, Beth. All right, let's continue. So after we analyze the data, what conclusion do we come up with? So based on this information, what type of conclusions can we draw from the data? What would be your next steps? And are there preventative measures? So we kind of discussed that. All right. So again, these are the 5 steps. We remember them with a mnemonic device. My sister often attracts drama. So let's take a moment to reflect on other ways we use the data in everyday lives. Can you name some ways that you've used the data outside of work and list those in the chat? So I'm going to go ahead and continue as you think about that. So when we're drawing conclusions, we need to bring in the team and strategize. So it's important to note that when we share, we need to make sure that those we're sharing with understand what they're looking at and what it means from a program standpoint. So students are the primary link to understanding your learners' motivation and challenges, and you are the best source to help others in your program understand the why behind what the reports show. And you're also the one that can make the biggest difference in whether a student stays and if a student learns. So career navigators are also your best line of defense. Not only do they help students create a career pathway plan, they can also adjust to create a plan B, a plan C when life gets in the way, and also refer to support services. Thank you, Lori. So working with your assessment team can ensure that the students are tested before they leave your class when time gets tough. And again, I think Sarah had mentioned about the number of hours they had. And from what Lori said, you could get that off of the NPR. So all these different groups, your student connection, your career navigator, your assessment team, these are all integral in knowing how to contribute to the bigger picture. And again, I do want to emphasize, we have all this data, but we do want to make sure that everybody understands what we're looking at when we're looking at all these different reports. So throughout this session, we've defined the data-driven decision-making process. We identified the characteristics of the process of decision-making. We recognize the data criteria available in teams, and we also applied the process for improved classroom outcome. So at this time, Sarah, the MSG report is provided to program directors. So at this time, I want to turn it over to Amy so that Amy can talk about the LEA assignments and what's happening next. And Amy, did you want to share your screen?
I think we can use yours, Olga. Thanks so much. And
Okay.
that was wonderful, Olga. Thanks for walking us through that. I think it's always helpful to dig into the data, but I know that there's a lot of information out there. So we love the DDDM process for kind of simplifying the steps. So I want to just talk about what's coming up next for you guys and getting you ready for our training on December 2nd, which will be, you guys will come for an all-day training. The morning we'll spend with the Administrative Leadership Academy group, so a joint session that morning, and then we'll be together in our instructional leader group in the afternoon and again on the morning of December 3rd. We're going to be doing a lot of different work. The topics that you see here, assessing our leadership styles, exploring a more instructional leadership and the teacher competencies. We are going to dig a little bit more into qualitative data and look at some frameworks for planning your project, setting SMART goals, and getting started on those improvement projects, your capstone projects. Next slide, Olga. So just to give you an idea, in the orientation, we had talked a little bit about how your work in the Leadership Academy culminates in an instructional improvement project that you'll be developing over the course of the Academy and presenting at our final session in April. So just to give you an overview, we're going to be supporting that process the whole way through, as you can see here on this slide. After today, we'd like to ask you to go into the portal. There's a past projects file in the portal where you can see what other instructional leaders as in the Academy have developed and give you a sense of like, what is this instructional improvement project? What does it look like? What have other instructional leaders done to kind of generate some ideas? And then when we come together on the 2nd and 3rd, we're going to spend some time understanding those projects a little bit more and giving you a chance to talk together with your colleagues and discuss your project ideas. On January 7th, you'll bring 2 possible project ideas to our webinar to share. And then your first draft of your project plan will be due in the portal on January 21st. That's just a draft. So it's not a one and done. Then on February 3rd and 4th, you'll have more training and more work on the project and more discussion time. Then you'll develop the first 3 draft slides of your presentation by the 11th, and we'll present and discuss those in our smaller group meetings on February 18th. And then between February 18th and April 22nd, you'll finish your final draft of your plan and your presentation and post those in the portal and get ready for presenting on the 22nd. And don't worry, this is a lot of information, so we'll be walking you through it. Next slide, Olga. So just to get ready for our next session on December 2nd, please read the article that's posted in the portal, The 6 Fundamental Skills Every Leader Should Practice. Complete that homework we assigned after our first session together, looking at yourself and the leadership framework wheel. And you're going to be completing an online private MLQ leadership self-assessment. And Deb Hargrove, you can go ahead to the next slide, Olga. Deb Hargrove is sending you an email probably right after you jump off this webinar with directions on how to get to that leadership questionnaire in Mind Garden online. It's a personal questionnaire, and you'll be completing it there and get a report. And we just ask you to bring your leadership assessment report with you on December 2nd.
And if you have any questions, please email me directly.
Thanks, Deb.
Yep.
So back to you, Olga, unless there are questions.
Thank you, Amy. Do we have any questions so far? That's a lot of information. I know you will continue to get emails from myself and Robin and Amy, and from the PD portal. You'll get notifications when information is placed there. I just wanted also to share that we will be sending out a survey, if not today, then possibly on Monday, to determine whether session 2 will be conducted as a face-to-face or if we'll continue virtually. Please be on the lookout for that email with a link to a survey, and it's going to be a really quick survey. So we'll be asking you to complete that survey before the Thanksgiving break. So any other questions? And Deborah's going to be sending out the email for the MLQ shortly, literally in a few minutes. So December 2nd is virtual. Yes, Carnice, December 2nd is virtual, and that should be in the PD portal shortly for registration. So keep an eye out for that. And yeah, okay, registration will be in the portal early next week. So thank you, everybody. We want to thank you for your participation, for responding in the chat. We appreciate your participation in this academy, and we look forward to continuing.